When I was a youth pastor, I was a youth pastor for 20-ish years working in youth ministry. I had taken a group of kids to this Nerf. It's like a battle park that we could just shoot Nerf guns at each other. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. It was like sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. I was like, this would be a good time for us to just get our energy out, shoot each other with some stuff. And we get to the facility, and we walk in, and there are all these flyers, like posters, plastered to the door that say "Welcome, soldiers." And like another 10 feet, it was like "Welcome to the war zone." Then another like 20 feet, it was like "Soldiers, you're now entering the war zone." And we get into this kind of empty room that was just full of gymnastics mats. And there's this man there who looks like Kreese from Cobra Kai, who comes out and he's in like a camouflage suit that he bought at like the Army Navy store, and it was sleeveless. He had cut the sleeves out, and he is scaring the fire out of these kids. And he's telling them, I want you to forget your civilian life. You've now entered into a war zone. We're in a battle, and one side's going to win and one side's going to lose, and life is written by winners. And I thought to myself, what I thought was going to be okay for kids is really this is really kind of weird. And I'm talking to the guy, and he's like, "Hey, these kids, they've got to be toughened up." When we get to scripture, there are stories that uh, are scary and deadly, and yet we've kind of made them into kids' stories to sort of soften the blow of what it means. So in this week's Lenten devotional, we're going to look at the story of Noah and the ark. It's the first time in Scripture, or in the history of the world, really, that we see a huge rainstorm coming. The earth had been watered by a mist up to this point. And then God speaks to Noah and tells him, "Hey, I want you to build this ship because I'm going to send a bunch of rain because humanity has disobeyed my commandments. Their hearts are far from me, and I'm essentially going to start over again. And Noah, I'm going to start over with your family." And he sends this huge flood, this worldwide global flood that comes and wipes out all of humanity except for Noah and his family. It's a harsh story. It's a harsh story of God's judgment, and it's a story that we've started painting on like nursery walls for kids, and you have to stop and think, uh, what's really going on here? Imagine the chaos and the confusion of a world that has never seen rain, especially rain in the volume that was happening, and everyone's dying. There's drowning, all this stuff's happening. Noah and his family, they're locked in this ark with all these animals that God has said bring in two by two, and the chaos and the confusion that had to be taking place for 40 days of just floating on the earth. Um, and in typical fashion for God, even in the chaos and the confusion, there's a promise. We saw this with the garden. That there was a promise that someone was going to come and crush the servant's head, and we see it with Noah, that God comes and speaks to him and says, "I'm not going to destroy the earth again with water, and in fact, I'm going to place a promise in the sky. I'm going to place a rainbow in the sky." So if you're following along, Genesis chapter 9, in verse 12 through 15, God speaks to Noah and he says this. God said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I've set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And when I bring clouds over the earth and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh." And in verse 17, God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." Now, we can look at a rainbow and see it as something that's beautiful, and it certainly is. You can hold a prism up to the light, right, and see the refracted light that's in there. But what God is really saying here is, I'm placing a bow, and the word in Hebrew is actually the word for a battle bow. So God is hanging up his battle bow and saying, I'm not going to bring judgment on the world in this fashion. In fact, I'm going to hang up my weapon of war in the sky, and every time you look at it, you'll see that there's a promise that there is peace between the two of us. And this battle bow that hangs there is a bow that's pointed actually toward heaven. It's a sign to say that if I break this covenant with you, the arrow actually isn't going to hit the earth. It's going to hit the very center of heaven. In Lent, in the Lenten season, we want us to engage with the sufferings of Jesus as he's walking to the cross. And we engage with the suffering, and that draws us into the story of the gospel. And when Jesus is hanging on the cross, we see what is meant by that rainbow way back in Genesis, that an arrow had actually struck the heart of God and hadn't landed on his people. The wrath had actually fallen on Jesus, the Son of God, through his great plan of redemption. And through that, we are all saved. So as we continue into Lent, as we march to the cross together, let us remember that we are free from God's wrath if we are connected to Jesus, that we are free from all the judgment and all the destruction that comes with sin, because that has all fallen on Jesus himself. So Midtowners, let us live in the light of that great truth this morning.